Now this slide shows you the relationship of morphologic changes in the endometrium and ovary to the pituitary and ovarian blood hormone levels during the menstrual cycle. During each menstrual cycle, the ovary undergoes cyclic changes that involve two phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. And the ovulation occurs between these two phases. Now, the follicular phase begins with the development of a small number of primary follicles under the influence of follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, the granulosa cells and thecal cells in these follicles, they begin to secrete a hormone estrogen. Now, ovulation is induced by a surge in the luteinizing hormone, and the luteal phase begins immediately after the ovulation and in the formation of corpus luteum. The estrogen and progesterone are secreted by the corpus luteum, and under the influence of these hormones, the principally progesterone, the endometrium of the uterus now begins its secretory phase, so as to prepare the uterus for implantation in the event of fertilization. Now let's look at the structure of the cervix. The two portions of the cervix, the endocervix or cervical canal, and the second part, ectocervix, which projects into the vagina. The endocervix has simple columnar epithelium, but there is a zone of transition where this epithelium becomes stratified squamous on the ectocervix part. Now, during each menstrual cycle, the cervical glands undergo important functional changes. The amount and properties of the mucus coming out from these glands vary during the menstrual cycle. Mucus from these glands can block the cervical canal, but at the mid-cycle, this mucus changes and there is a decrease in the viscosity, allowing for passage of the spermatozoa into the uterus and oviduct. Here's a section through the cervix. Now, on your left-hand side, you can see stratified squamous epithelium of the ectocervix, while the simple columnar epithelium of the cervical canal or endocervix. Note the abrupt change or transition from a stratified squamous epithelium to a simple columnar epithelium. Large glands or cervical glands are present and some are branched. In this lecture, we're going to briefly discuss some of the main points of a very complex structure of placenta, and we're going to review the developed placenta only. Here you're looking at a schematic of a mature placenta and a section through it. Here's the embryonic part and here's the maternal part. Now, the embryonic portion of the placenta is attached to the umbilical cord containing paired umbilical arteries and an umbilical vein. The cord has an epithelial covering surrounding a mucoid connective tissue which surround these vessels. Now, as you see that these vessels they branch into the chorionic plate, from which extend extensively branching structure called villi. Now let's look at the maternal side or the circulation, maternal circulation. Now the maternal blood enters the placenta through numerous endometrial spiral arteries, and that penetrate the basal plate here. The maternal blood is then directed deep into the intravillous space, which is shown here, and on this section is here intravillous space. It then passes over the surface of villi, where exchange of gases and metabolic products occurs. Now the maternal blood finally leaves the intravillous space through these endometrial vein here. The mature placenta is divided into cotyledons by placental septa that are formed by outgrowths of decidua basalis. The surface epithelium of the villi, which faces the maternal blood, is referred to as a syncytiotrophoblastic layer. Now, these cells they are derived from an epithelial layer called the cytotrophoblast, and these cells fuse to form a true multicellular syncytium. So, in addition to forming this maternal and fetal blood interface, these cell layer synthesizes glycogen, cholesterol, fatty acids to be used by the fetus. Now let's look at the basal plate of the placenta. Basal plate of the placenta consists of the decidua basalis, of the endometrium, as well as the embryonic portion of the placenta that adheres to the decidua basalis. In addition to providing interaction between the maternal and the fetal blood, placenta also produces HCG, IGF, EGF, and other hormone, and thus is an important endocrine organ. Now let's look at the structure of the vagina, which is a tubular organ extending from the cervix to the vestibule. The vaginal wall consists of 3 layers. The inner layer is a stratified squamous epithelium with underlying lamina propria. And this surface is basically lubricated mainly by mucus produced by the cervical glands. Also, deep region of the connective tissue contains a rich supply of blood vessels. These blood vessels supply the various layers of the vaginal wall. Now, the epithelium of the vagina undergoes cyclic changes during the menstrual cycle, and under the influence of estrogen, the epithelium becomes thicker and accumulates glycogen. Now, the middle layer is composed of indistinct layer of smooth muscle, and these layers are continuous with cervix myometrium. The striated muscle fibers of bulbospongiosus muscle are also present at the vaginal opening. Now, the last one is the outer layer, which is an adventitia, consists of collagen fibers, elastic fibers, blood and lymphatic vessels. Now let's look at the changes in the structure of mammary gland. The mammary glands are compound tubulo-alveolar glands, and these glands they develop under the influence of estrogen. Now during puberty, the gland development is essentially by proliferation of mesenchymal cells and differentiation into dense irregular connective tissue and adipose tissue. By adulthood, the complete ductal architecture of the gland is established, but they are dormant or inactive. Here you can see several lobules, and on your right hand side you can see a magnified view of dormant epithelial glands. Now, until pregnancy, the mammary glands remain inactive or dormant. And during pregnancy, there is a dramatic increase in proliferation and differentiation of the mammary gland. And this proliferation and differentiation of secretory alveoli is under control of progesterone, prolactin, and placental lactogen. In this section of the mammary gland, you can see numerous active lobules and interlobular ducts. The high magnification of this one shows you an active lobule with acini. Down here you see a high mag of acini, which essentially is a sac-like structure where milk is synthesized and secreted. Now, after birth, the ejection of milk from the breast is stimulated by the oxytocin.